Differentiation, one of those buzzwords that we all as teachers sometimes cringe when we hear it or we love it. I haven't found a lot of people that are on the fence about differentiation. It tends to be one of the best tools to use for your kids, but one of the hardest things to implement as a teacher. Maybe this will give you some ideas to help you to individualize your instruction a little bit more to meet the needs of your kids. In the T-TESS rubric, differentiation has its own dimension, but it's also an idea that's in multiple parts of the rubric. So what does the rubric say? It says that the teacher makes adjustments to address strengths and gaps in background knowledge, life experiences, and skills of all students. This is really happening when you're doing your lesson plan, when you're determining, I'm teaching this new skill, what are the strengths that they have so far, and what are their gaps? Do they know how to add 2-digit decimals, or do they struggle with that and I need to revisit that skill? The teacher adapts lessons to address the individual needs of students. This is one that teachers really struggle with. If you have 30 kids in your room, how in the world do I address 30 needs in the class? Let's really hope maybe 25 of those 30 kids all have the same need, right? Also under differentiation, you have that they provide differentiated instructional methods and content to ensure that they have the opportunity to master what is being taught. Remember that the baseline and your bookends for your entire lesson is that the students are able to master the objective. How you get them there, you could take 20 different paths to get them to mastering the objective as long as they master it. Another part is recognizing when students become confused or disengaged and then responding to their needs whenever you see that they're confused or disengaged. What can you do to maybe deliver the content differently, have them process differently, where they can show you that they understand the material. And then also regularly monitoring the quality of student participation and performance. This is really going to come in when you circulate during those student-centered lessons. So why even differentiate? One, not all of our kids are going to be coming to us with the same materials. Not everybody's going to come to us having the same basic skills. So we have to make sure that we allow for those opportunities to fill the gaps. Kids are going to come to us with different interests. Especially this is one that you can really cater to in subjects such as language arts, where you're teaching a skill, a reading skill or writing skill, and you can really cater to the student's interest to elaborate on that skill. Also, students have different learning profiles. They have different ways that they learn. Some of us are verbal. Some of us learn from written. Some of us are visual spatial. Some of us are auditory. I know for me, I was the auditory learner. You could tell me stories about the lesson all day long, and I would remember everything you said. If you had me read to learn everything, I'm going to miss a lot. So just knowing that your kids have different ways of learning that best meet their needs and have to do with being maybe kinesthetic or visual or auditory, just know that they're going to have those different needs. So what exactly do I differentiate? Well, you can differentiate the content and how it's delivered. You can differentiate how the kids process the content and make sense of it. So this is kind of their practice. And then their products. This could be whenever you assess their learning. Having different products that the kids can use to demonstrate what they've learned. So it can be the material that the students learn, how they process through that material, and then what do they use to show you that they learned it. So what is differentiation? How does it look like in the classroom? So here's some concrete examples. If you're going to differentiate your content, it could be the different types of books you use. You can have information that is, instead of it being a paragraph form, it's in graphic organizer form. You can have kids do some type of jigsaw. This would be a grouping strategy that's mentioned in some of the other videos where they learn the material that way. Learning contract, I had actually a college professor where we had our whole syllabus based on a learning contract, where we can decide, and this is very abstract for a lot of kids, where we decided on what tasks we had to do to get A, B, or C in the class. So there can be also some middle school tweaks and high school tweaks to cater to that. How you process it, it could be the ways they do their homework. This is where if you have kids that need any chunking of content or they need shortened assignments to show that they got the material, this could be where you can really bring that in. Dialectical journals, they're very useful in language arts classes. Having a little mini reader writer workshop, for example, making an anchor chart. I have some social studies teachers that love using this, and in language arts as well. This is also a staple in elementary school. You can have the kids make anchor charts. The kids play a game to learn the material. Lit circles. This is where you can really differentiate novels, for example, in your classes. Having tiered activities, which we'll talk about that one a little more later. Raft, another strategy we'll discuss later. And then maybe some type of the way you do your exit slips. You could have cards that give them tasks that they do, and it could be 20 different tasks or 10 different tasks, but it's all processing the same thing. Your product, this is where things like a choice board can be really useful. Using a tic-tac-toe board, which I'll show you an example later. Same thing with tiered assessments. This could be using that multiple intelligences option. In audio, you can have them cater to being auditory, kinesthetic, or visual. Maybe they show you a role play. Maybe they show you, they can write a paper about it. Maybe they can do some type of speech or about their assignment. So these are all just different ways that you can differentiate the content, the process, and the product. Some different strategies that can be used. I mentioned some of these on the last slide. Raft is one that's really really useful. You can use this in just about any assignment, and that's where you have a chart. This is one where you have a chart, and the kids they have to choose one row. So and it gives you the role that they're playing, who's the audience maybe they're writing to or presenting to, what kind of format would they use? Would they use a letter? Would they use a speech? Would they make a protest poster? And then what's the topic about? And so with the kids, they may have 4 or 5 different ones of these, and then they pick one that they use. Let's say they're talking about the expansion during the Roosevelt era and the interference in Latin American countries. Let's say that they pick their role as Theodore Roosevelt, their audience is Latin American citizens. They have to give a 3-minute speech as their format, and the topic is why the U.S. needs to be involved in Latin American affairs. So that would be an example of a rafting assignment. Tic-tac-toe board, very similar with the chart. This time they just have to make a tic-tac-toe of what they do. So it could be diagonal, it could be horizontal, vertical, and they pick those 3 things to figure out how to show that they know the material. A tiered lesson plan. This is whenever you have 3 different types of assignments from which they can choose. They could have a level that's very concrete. They can have a level that's somewhat complex and somewhat concrete. And then they can have one that's way more abstract. So it's doing the same amount of work in terms of maybe time and that kind of stuff. But let's say a student is at the level where they still need to be concrete, or maybe they're at the level where they understand it a little more and they can expand a little bit. Or let's say that they've learned this, they've known this subject for a while, and they think outside the box and they want to do something abstract. So in your tiered lesson, you still have the same background information that the kids get, and then once they get to their processing and product, they have 3 different ways, 3 different branches they can take. Another one that I enjoyed using a lot was learning centers. So this is another one I use with learning centers. So what you might do with this is you may have, say, 6 stations. Let's say you have 6 stations and you have 2 that are anchor stations. Those are required. The kids have to do them because they're foundational and it has to do with some type of skill. And then you may have 4 optional stations where, let's say, in total they need to do the 2 required and 2 other optional stations. Maybe they're a type of case study and so that they see application of that skill. So this would be another way to do your centers. Instead of doing like every kid goes to every station, they go to those 2 anchor stations and then they get to pick from the other 4 which 2 they do. So this is another one where you can add in that student choice to differentiate. One of our target groups that we often have to look at for differentiation is our English language learners. So whenever you're deciding to differentiate, just make sure that with your ELLs that you have total participation, that you incorporate academic vocabulary, and this needs to be in context, not just defining the word for them. You need to promote language and literacy. promoting that reading, that writing, the explanation, communication skills, and then make sure you scaffold for your ELLs so that they can build up from the basic academic vocabulary to using it in context to using it as a higher level. One of my favorite things that I learned from a training, this is from John Seidlitz. If you ever get a chance to go take a training on teaching ESL students with John Seidlitz, I highly recommend it. And this is one of his pieces of advice or parts of his training is 7 steps to a language-rich classroom. This is something that was catered to language ELLs, but this could go to any student, regardless of what their, quote, label is. Make sure your students know what to say when they don't know what to say. Give them other prompts or sentence stems. May I have more information? May I ask a friend? Things like that. Can you repeat the question? Other things to say besides I don't know. I don't know needs to be eradicated. I don't know needs to be eradicated from your classroom. Complete sentences. Even if you have to give them sentence stems to achieve this, it gets them in that habit of knowing how to answer and complete sentences. Make sure you randomize and rotate responses from the students, and make sure that they know you randomize. Use those popsicle sticks with their names on it, and you randomly draw a kid. Use the, I've heard them called equity cards, where you pull a card that has the kid's name on it. Make sure you give them, you make it random, not all the time, but there's opportunities for randomizing your responses, getting responses from kids. Use total response signals. This can be, usually this is something that's very kinesthetic. And this is really helpful, especially when you have beginner ELLs that are really at the beginning level of learning English and they're still in that basic language skill level. And you have to use more kinesthetic to and refer to certain information. Use your hands, use your body language to help them to understand the vocabulary. Whenever you're teaching vocabulary, make sure you're providing visuals to go along with it. If you're teaching them the word for cow, give a picture of a cow so that they know that, oh, baka, that's also a cow. And then make sure that those strategies, as always, align with your objective. Give the students a chance to participate in structured conversations. Again, give them stems. Ask them questions. Give them question stems to start. Give them stems on how to provide feedback to their partner. Give them opportunities to speak in class. ELLs and every student needs to listen, speak, read, and write in every lesson. And also make sure that the students have some structured reading and writing activities. So, you may have some SSR, SSW, but give them that chance to do the structured writing. And again, that might come in with teaching them some annotation skills for your reading, and then it may come in the form of giving them some focus areas in their writing to know whenever they're answering a paragraph response that sentence 1, this is your topic for sentence 1. This is your topic for sentence 2. Here are some sentence stems. The link for information about the 7 steps in the language classroom will be in the comments section, and it's in the Google Drive folder. Some final thoughts on differentiation. You have to know your students. What are their gaps? What are their strengths? What are things that motivate them? What do you know is something that, what's even an activity that your kids are automatically engaged when you do that activity? One of the easiest ways to differentiate is to provide them choice. Give them that choice board, that tic-tac-toe board, that rafting assignment where they get to choose the role or the audience or the way that they show their product that's catered to their learning styles. And then my biggest soapbox is don't let a label be there to differentiate. Don't say, oh, that kid, they're not special ed, they're not 504, they're not an ELL, or they're not TAG, so I don't have to differentiate for them, right? Wrong. You need to do what's best for the kids, and that's for every kid, whether they have a label on your roster or not. You have to differentiate so that the kids can meet the objective in the way that best fits them. Maybe this gave you a little bit more explanation of a very difficult topic for teachers. Maybe it gave you some ideas that you can incorporate into your current planning without having to totally redo your lessons, and give your kids a chance to have some choice in showing how they know the material.